indie game garden.
Ryan Marr is a founding member of the startup FloWHOA, the game studio currently making Scallywags, a tactical crew management roguelike inspired by FTL and One Piece, where players quest to become pirate legends. Ryan helped found FloWHOA in 2023 alongside Goode and Mike Schmalz. Before that, Ryan spent over 15 years at Digital Extremes, working his way through QA, QA management, system design, and consulting. During that stint, he worked on games like Bioshock 2 and Warframe, among others. In his spare time, Ryan is a hobbyist developer who has created hundreds of prototypes over the years. He's also released some solo mobile games about goats. Ryan is a self-taught engineer and passionate creative. He embodies the values we love to celebrate here on Indie Game Garden by letting his joy and creativity blossom from his professional work all the way through to his family life. He even wrote a kid's book and makes tabletop RPGs to play with his kids. He's also the father to 2 dogs and 2 cats and a lizard. Maybe more animals too. I didn't ask him. It's an honor to have him on the show today. Ryan, it's great to have you here. To start, I have to hear more about your path. In the correspondence that we've had, you told me that you went to college for graphic design and programming, but you didn't finish either program. Instead, you taught yourself engineering and pursued a creative dream that has taken you all around the video game industry. And I would love to just hear more about kind of the winding nature of this path toward game development and how your creative side drives your passion for games.
It's a bit of a long story. I've gone through so many things, but like just before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about your creative journey because I discovered your channel through Instagram, just kind of like randomly, and since then, the Indie Game Garden and your other podcast, Bargain Bin, has been like my go-to for a couple of weeks now, where I've just been, as I'm working away, it keeps my front brain entertained and busy while my back brain's, solving problems and doing the things that I do on a day-to-day basis. And, I really appreciate you taking the time to invite me on here to talk about my creative journey. And I just want to take a moment to celebrate yours because without it, we wouldn't be talking today and I wouldn't have had all these many hours of exposure to like games that I don't normally hear about, like Vital Shell. I love a good mech game, and you guys covered that, and you had so much fun with it. It had me looking it up and grabbing it, like it was good. And you do your creative stuff, and I enjoy it. And I wanted to say that I do enjoy it, and I want to make sure that I did say that. So.
Thank you. That means a lot. Yeah, it sometimes feels like I'm just throwing this out into the void. So I really appreciate you listening and engaging. And it's another reason why I'm honored to have you on the chat.
I love it because it's one of the things when you create something, a lot of the times you do create something and it is just thrown out into the void. And the act of creation is kind of what you wanted to do. And anything that happens after that is gravy, it's cool, whatever. But sometimes it's really hard to just put it out in the world. Yeah. And getting celebrated for just putting something out in the world, I think, is important. So I wanted to make sure we took some time and celebrated you.
Thank you.
I ramble on about random stuff.
Hey, it's Johnny here popping in. I promise I did not pay Ryan to say these nice things about me, make me a little red in the cheeks, blushing a little bit, but since he wanted to include them, I thought we would honor that, and I just wanted to say thanks again to Ryan for listening and engaging, and to you all for listening. Okay, back to the show.
I've always loved making games. Like since when I was little, we didn't have a lot of money, so like I didn't have a console or anything when I was really little, and I was born in the '80s, so it was like one time ago. But I loved games and playing with games, and I didn't always have people to play with, so it was like I remember I made it was probably in like grade 3 or 4. I had this little binder, and I essentially made like a Dungeons and Dragons you could play by yourself. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know what Dungeons and Dragons was or anything like that. Like I just had this this binder, and a page would have like a picture of something, and you could roll some dice and deal some damage, or it would be a direction in a maze, and then it would tell you a different page to go to, and you could. And I had these little adventures that I made, and I just loved it. And that's really got me interested in like making games and how far I could push it. And then I would make card games and board games and all sorts of things as I was growing up. And then in high school, I had like a programming class, and I'd never programmed or even really had a computer, but I fell in love with the idea of coding. And I'll use coding a lot because I won't say that I'm a programmer, because I think programmers are really smart individuals and they have a lot of things that they've learned, different algorithms, different ways to solve problems, and like these advanced mathematical theories that are just frankly beyond me. So I like to code. I'll call myself a coder sometimes. But we were doing like Turing, which is like a really introductory programming language, and Visual Basic and stuff like that in school. And I made like a little adventure game. We tried to escape prison, but it was really just a bunch of pictures and buttons, and it'd be like, go forward, go back, go right, use a knife or whatever. Nothing super sophisticated, but it was a fun little project. And then after that, after high school, I think it was like 94, I got a PC Gamer demo disc. And I don't know if you're familiar with PC Gamer magazine.
Yeah,
I think they still do things now, but I think it's like quarterly instead of monthly. But like they used to come with these little game discs, right? And you try them. And I couldn't afford a lot of games, but like, I could afford a magazine once a month. And PC Gamer was so amazing. And they had a demo called Click and Play. And it was just like this really bare bones game engine, and it had like a sprite editor built into it. And that's started my love of just like building prototypes and things. Because like I would spend just with the demo, like I couldn't find the game. So I didn't really have like the internet or anything. It was like a 486 and a CD-ROM. It's all I had at the time. And I would make just random things. Like I remember I had played at a friend's house Warcraft, like the original Warcraft, and I'm just like, man, that was so much fun. I wonder if I could make something like that. And like, in this demo, you couldn't really save your progress or anything, so I would just spend days making this thing and play it for a few hours, and then I'd have to restart the computer or whatever, and it would be gone forever. But it's that program that made me love making games. And in the late 90s, early 2000s, you couldn't go to school for game anything. So it's like I wanted to make games, and my family didn't want me to make games. So I went into, right after high school, I was really good at like cabinet making and machining and stuff like that. My family does it. So I just went into the wood shops, and I was working there full time. And then after a few years, I'm just like, I really want to make games. How do I make games? I'm like, I'll go to school for graphic design. And I went to school for graphic design. I'm like, well, this doesn't really teach me what I think I need to make a video game, to do video game art. And I learned a lot of fundamentals about art and creation, but I also learned I'm shit at it. Like I know a lot of theory, but I just don't have the kind of skill, the artistic talent to illustrate something, or to make, like, I could do 2D like pixel style art because it's very formulaic, and I could plan it out. It's just like coloring in blocks, and I can color in blocks. But I don't have artistic talent, I suppose, in the sense of like a traditional fundamentals kind of way. And I couldn't get around it, and it was just like, oh, well, this isn't working, and I'm just kind of wasting my time here. So I went back to work for a few more years and earned some more money. And I was like, well, I'll go back to school for programming. It's like, I like to code, and I know that you need to code to make games. So I'll go back to school for programming a few years later. And a few years later, I went back and I was going through the programming courses, and I did well enough and I enjoyed it. But they tried to teach or they were forcing command line programming in the Linux environment, and I hated it. And I was just like, is there any way that I could not do this? And like, no, you need it if you're going to be a programmer. I'm like, well, I want to be a games programmer. I don't want to.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a business programmer. I don't want to commit. I'm not going to be working. I promise you, I won't apply to the jobs that have like a Linux as a requirement. Like, I just want to do, like, just let me take these C++ courses. That's what I want.
Yeah.
But I don't want the Linux stuff. So please, is there anything that we can do? No, you need the Linux. You need the Linux. I'm like, you don't need Linux. I know you don't need it. And I'm like, and so I didn't do well there either. So I ended up kind of giving up. But while I was in college, I met a couple of really cool people, some friends of mine.
Yeah.
And we started just, I don't know, it was like world building, like for fun, right? And I took a lot of our for fun things, and I would make little programs out of like C# and C++ and things. Little, I wouldn't even really call them games, but they were like systems behind games, you know, like character creators, like, oh, if we have these kind of stats, and you were level 1, or if you were level 50 or 20 or 13, you know, what would the stats breakdown be? How many extras would you have that you could attribute? And so, like, I'd make a bunch of these little prototypes there, and that was kind of fun to do. And we had these big plans for these big RPGs and everything. And then I'm from London, Ontario. And Ontario has a major hub in Toronto for game development. But I didn't, like, all my life, my roots and everything were in London, so I didn't want to leave, really. So I was trying to figure out how I could get into games. And then I heard of, there's a little DICE. DICE had a branch in London that was, well, not really a branch, but like there's a studio that worked with DICE to make the Battlefield games. And they had a little office in London, Ontario. And they were hiring QA for Battlefield 2, one of the spec forces and things. So I was like, oh, I could do that. And I applied, and they went to give me a job. But at the time, I said no, because I had just met a girl, and the girl's mom had just given me a job.
I see.
So I was just like, oh, maybe I shouldn't do this, like, chase my dream video game thing, and I should probably keep this job that the girl's mom gave me. And then this other guy that I knew got the job. And then the things with the girl didn't really work out. So I was just like, oh, man, what a terrible life decision I made. But then a few years later, Digital Extremes, which I didn't know at the time, but Digital Extremes was hiring for QA for Bioshock 2. They just got the Bioshock 2 contract, and they needed bodies for testing. So I was like, okay, I applied to it, and so did some of these other people, and I applied, and that time I got in, and I was just like, okay, great. And I started working for Digital Extremes QA, and got some of my friends that I had met in that college course. It was just like, hey, they need people. It's like, we've been building this world. Wouldn't it be cool if maybe, you know, like, let's get in. Maybe we can pitch them our ideas or something. You know. And we started working at Digital Extremes together, and that was really cool. And we spent years in. At first, it was just Bioshock QA, and that was back when games had like end of cycle layoffs,
right?
Which is, it's not a great practice at all. It's not something that I condone. And for a few years, the industry kind of stopped doing it. Like there's big pushes inside the industry where they're like, okay, we're not going to have end of cycle, end of project layoffs, and we're going to invest in our people and all that stuff. And that was really, really good for a while. And that's kind of, as of recently, is really, the company stopped pursuing that, and we're going kind of backwards in that regard,
right?
Where companies are kind of, oh, the project's over, let's lay off a whole bunch of people. But D wasn't doing that at the time, and we just finished Bioshock, and they did have to let go of a bunch of people, but they were talking about how they didn't want to do that anymore. And I had to beg and work really hard to be like, hey, don't lay me off. I can work really hard. Like, let's build a QA department for your next project.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, okay, sure. So I managed to stay on, and then the next project came up, and I was able to help build a team from some of our previous people, like some of my friends, some of the other people that we worked with, and we built this QA team. And because we all had previous experience and we worked hard to make a name for ourselves, or to prove that we were valuable, like, don't keep laying us off. We really added a whole lot of efficiency to the QA department, and DE was one of those first companies that kind of recognized it. They're like, oh wow, like, if you invest in your QA people, like, one QA person that you invest in can do the work of 3 or 4 QA people that is, constantly fired and rehired and fired and rehired. And so they really got to see that firsthand, and we grew the QA department through games like The Darkness 2 and Star Trek, which was, objectively an awful game. But it taught me a very important lesson about being in a creative industry like that, is that, and something that I don't think a lot of people realize about QA is, and this is mostly with bigger games, not necessarily small indie games, because small indie game, like, everybody's QA there,
Right.
and they just do a lot. They tons and tons of work. But in these big companies, they'll release games and bugs come out, and the community starts yelling. It's like, oh, didn't anybody test it? Didn't anybody test it? Nobody tested it.
Right.
But what Star Trek showed me is that, like, it was objectively not a great game, and there was bugs, but we, as a QA department, we still had a lot of pride for Star Trek because we found a lot of those bugs, but it's not up to the QA department to fix those bugs, right? It's like, you find them and you document them and you say these are bad, but it's a producer and the overall project management side of things that decides what bugs do and don't get fixed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like having that experience where you're just like, oh man, like, I can do my job as best as I can. And sometimes that has to be enough, right? It's like, that this project, you're like, they're paying me to do this thing for this project. So it's like, I got to do it to the best of my ability. And you do. And sometimes that has to be good enough, right? Is it like, not everybody's going to like it, and some things are going to be bad, but you don't always have control over all those things. And that was a kind of like a humbling experience for me, and I think for a lot of the people who were working at the time, where you had to kind of like shift your perspective from, like, this is going to be a great piece of art, to this is going to be a great showcase for my abilities, or a test of my abilities, my ability to deal with a community of people who, tell you they hate it and it's awful, and you look at all these bugs, you must have done a really awful job. And that's, as a QA person who really cared about what they did, those comments often really, really hurt. And they get said a lot. But I think I've gone off on this huge tangent. I'm sorry.
No. You actually, like, I was going to ask about QA next, so that covered a lot of what I was interested in.
Perfect.
Yeah. But again, like, I would love to hear from, obviously you told us the story of working in QA at Digital Extremes, managing the team there, and some of the challenges that happened during that time. And from there, like, moving forward with your path, what happened?
Yeah. Well, so it was like, after I ran, we built up the department. Warframe came about, and Warframe was a really huge game. It's a big success for Digital Extremes. It's a big success for free to play, like, quality free to play games in general. It's still to this day one of the most popular free to play co-op games out there, and a lot of that is the passion of the developers behind it. And they work really, really hard to create that experience. It's a wonderful thing. And that happens at real breakneck speed. And the QA is always like the last piece of the puzzle. So like when updates come out, it's like those QA people, they work nuts. They're getting things sometimes minutes before the button gets pushed for it to go out. So it's like they have minutes to hours to test to get things out there. And I hope if anybody who plays Warframe listens to this podcast, give those QA people a break, because they work real hard to get the game the way that you get it, and it's not always perfect, but there's always eyes on it, and there's always people working really hard to get it to you. But anyway, I guess like after the as Warframe was going on, I moved into design. I was ready for something new. QA was great, and I helped build this department, and I helped move people through digital extremes. People come into QA and they'd want to be level designers or programmers, and I really enjoyed helping move people through. It's like, oh, these are the kind of skills you need to be a programmer here. It's like, let's work on those skills, or these are what you need to help become a level designer or technical designer or an artist. And that's probably like the most rewarding thing I did ever up until Scallywags, is helping all these people move. And some of my really good friends, a lot of those friendships were forged by helping them move through the things. So it was always an endearing time for me. But I wanted a little bit more. I wanted to do something else. So we were we were going to work on a second project, and I was just like, oh, I want to get in on it. And so I started talking to people and about design and things, and how I want to move into one of those roles. And eventually I moved into design roles, and I worked on a couple of projects that never really went anywhere. We would get to the point of and this is one of the big difference between like a big entity like Digital Extremes versus like an indie entity, is that you get to a certain point and somebody's just like, we're not finding the fun, or we can't monetize it. So it's been
so
great.
That's all you need to hear.
Yeah. It's like, it's been great. The work you've done is great, but let's try something else. It's like, okay, you shift off to trying a new thing, and that was really fun. And it was all right. And then as time went on, Digital Extremes decided to do like a publishing thing where they would help finance and share the wealth from what they learned from Warframe. And I worked with those people and some of our external partners for a while. And that was cool. It taught me a lot of different skills outside of development that I didn't realize I would need. Specifically, like one of the things that I ended up being pretty good at was they would ship me all over the world because I was good at talking to groups of people. And so like I would do, when Warframe launched in China, they'd ship me off to China for several week stints where I helped the company in China set up like a bunch of their back end technology, and just really, I was just a face person. So it's just like the people in China would tell me the problems, and then I would tell the people in Canada. And, it's kind of like the liaison that way. But when I go to Gamescom in Germany and E3 in San Francisco and stuff, because if you put me in a room with a bunch of people and you get me to talk about a game that I was working on and passionate about, I get everybody excited.
Yeah.
They really like that. So, but honestly, I'm a pretty big introvert. So it's like I can be on for those 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
But then like I crash, and I need like 2 weeks where it's just like, nobody talk to me. I need to recharge
I'm
all
the
these
same
batteries. Way. And everybody's just like, oh, I never thought that you'd be so introverted. And I'm just like, well, I can be an introvert in various bursts.
Yeah.
And so, but that was really cool because I got to see a lot of the world and meet a lot of other people in the industry, and that was fun. But it was lacking in creativity. It wasn't filling my creative bucket. And I like one of the things that little click and play engine thing that I told you about showed me is that I loved making prototypes, not necessarily a full game, but just little things to test an idea out in my head. I'd be like, oh, I played a lot of Diablo and how their inventory worked. It's like, oh, maybe I could make an inventory work like that. And, I would spend a few weeks and I'd build this little inventory. And that's all it was, right? It would just be like inventory manipulation. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, that was fun. Or I made a dialogue system. And so like over the years, I just fell in love with prototyping. It gave me this like creative outlet where and I loved a bunch of different engines. I tried a bunch of different engines, but I really loved Game Maker. I don't know if they're still owned by Yo-Yo Games, but at the time, I used Game Maker a lot. I made a ton of stuff with it because it was just, I loved the scripting language is very close to C#, which is a really easy language to learn. And their scripting language was just basically, it's like kind of formatted like C# with a few of their own hooks. And it was really easy, really well documented, easy to do. So I love doing it. And yeah, I have probably thousands of these little, you wouldn't even call them games. They're just like these little prototypes of inventory systems, dialogue systems, transitions or save states, like all these little things that I was like, oh, I want to make a quest system with save data.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I don't have a game in mind, but I'm just going to make it to make it.
That's sweet.
And so like that's how I started filling my creative bucket, was doing these little things. And eventually a bunch of those systems came together and I made the Four Goats game, which is just a silly little game that I released on Android. And it was like Flappy Birds times 4. So you had like 4 quadrants, which I guess that's redundant because 4 and quadrant, anyway. But you would have 4 game spaces and 4 goats, and the world travels sideways. Yeah. And there would be little platforms, little hazards, and you'd have to jump. And you'd have to jump each goat over the hazards, but you'd have to remember the hazard's position as they go from right to left. And so it was like Ultimate Simon, really.
I see.
So it was like you'd see them coming in, you jump them. And I was like, oh, that was a lot of fun. And that, didn't ever amount to much. It was just fun, and it was fun exercise to put out into the world, because the easy part and the flashy part of making a game is also the shortest part.
Yeah.
So it's like finding the fun and making that first, like those gameplay loops. It's so much fun and it's so exciting. But 90% of making a game is all the dull stuff at the end. So it's just like, oh, you've got the game loop and it's a lot of fun, but now you need the menus that support it. And are you going to localize those menus? You need that put in. Are you going to save your game? What about all of the content to go through, right? It's like you've got to make all of that stuff. But like, yeah, so it's 10% of like doing these really fun prototypes, and then 90% is all of this monotonous kind of work that nobody tells you about. And until you actually go to release a game on your own, you don't really know. You're just like, oh, I got to make these buttons. Oh man, I need 15 buttons. And you're just like, that's a lot of buttons. And you have to go through and you have to make all those buttons, and you can reuse a lot of logic, but you gotta make them look pretty. And that's like, you'll have so many different things, like, is this kind of button? And you're like, it's a rectangle. How many different versions of a rectangle can you have?
Yeah.
But I mean, if you play a lot of games, there's a lot of different things you can do with a rectangle. And so that was like the first game that I released on my own where I did everything. It was a big eye-opening experience of like, oh, there's a bunch of little monotonous things that you do in games and you have to do to really make it a thing.
Yeah.
And then that kind of, I kind of burnt out on that, and I went back to focusing on, and this whole time, I'm going through my friends and family and meeting my wife and having my kids. I don't want to downplay any of that stuff, because that's a very important part of my journey.
Yeah.
And then I made the follow-up to Four Goats. Like I expanded on it. I'm just like, oh, I'll make just like a totally free version supported by ads. Can I do that? I had to figure that out. And then I made Four Goats Forever, which is just the same concept, but with more things happening and slightly better art.
Yeah.
And slightly better gameplay. And it had like a really fun versus mode, but it's like hot seat versus, because one of the things I love is playing games with people.
Yeah.
In the same room, like I think that there's a lot of things that you can do online, but nothing really compares to sitting on a couch and playing with somebody.
I totally agree. Yeah.
And in Four Goats Forever, there's like this versus mode where it's the same concept, except you only controlled two goats and your opponent controlled two goats, and you put the tablet or phone between you, and you just kind of like two finger do your jumps, but instead of the hazards coming down, bees would fly over your goats, and you would have to jump your goat into a bee to knock it to the other side of the screen to make it a hazard for your opponent to jump over, and they'd be doing the same. So you're just kind of going back and forth, and you're headbutting these bees to try to beat the person on the other side. And it was just like this fun little thing. And I think that was a lot of fun. And so that was like the most complex, because like that one had like unlocks and save data and all these things. It was the most complex game I did on my own, and it really wasn't very complex at all.
So yeah, it's amazing how those things can spiral.
Yeah.
It's like I just want to add one more thing, and then it's weeks or months of work.
And then you don't realize it is that you're like, oh man, I'm finally done, and you're like, oh man, it's been 2 years since I started this project. Where did all that time go? And then I really love making that stuff. And then at the end of 2023, I was let go from Digital Extremes. They had their just at the start of when all these companies started letting go people. I think it was from 2023 to mid 2024, the start of 2025. It was something like over 60% of the games industry were affected by these job losses that came through, and like it's just an awful time for the industry itself. But that's when a friend of mine, Alan, we were kind of let go at the same time, and we were talking afterwards. It's like, oh, what are you going to do next? And what do you want to do? And it was a lot of I don't know, but I still am making prototypes because I had a lot of time now.
Yeah.
And I was making a prototype, and it was just like a little boat game. I don't know if you're familiar with Faster Than Light, but it was inspired by Faster Than Light, where it's just like a sail. I called it the Sleepless Sea, and you just control. It was essentially the same thing. You would go travel around, transporting this luminous pearl. You had to get it to this lighthouse. And, you were trying to. The world was dark. The sun had gone away, and you were trying to do this thing. And at the same time, Alan was also starting world building and thinking about this project he wanted to do, which was also boat based, but it was more colorful and it was vibrant, and it had a lot of the precursors to what Scallywags that we ended up making together had. So we took some of like these gameplays ideas, and a lot of Alan was imagining this 3D tactical action game, anthropomorphic animals. I'm just like, oh, I like that a lot. And I'm like, I'm also working, like I was also messing around with like a boat game. I'm like, it's crazy that we're both thinking boat games.
Yeah.
And then we're just like, well, let's do it together. So like, okay, sure. I use GameMaker a lot. He didn't want to use GameMaker. He wanted something a little more higher end. So we switched over to Unreal and started prototyping and doing all this stuff. And eventually we ran into the Mike Schmalz, who was a former he was the former president of Digital Extremes. But he is actually this huge driving force in the video game industry in Ontario. He is he stands up for it. He fights for the industry, and he's a big part of encouraging the industry to grow in Ontario. Like he's really passionate about the video game industry as a business from the business side of things. So he's a great person to get on board, and really helped create FloWHOA into a something that could be a functioning entity.
Yeah.
Because with Mike's help, we were able to take this little demo that we were building and present it to Ontario Creates, which is this like grant. It's like a lot of places have those like grants for the arts, right?
Right.
And so we applied to it, and they're just like, "Oh yeah, it's great," and they gave us this little grant, and the grant allowed us to take that idea and to hire a couple artists to help build it and expand upon it.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff wasn't not something that we generally knew about or knew how to do, and Mike really helped facilitate that. And so it was like the three of us kind of came together and we took it, and then we got to hire Jeremy and Aya and Ziad, and they're fantastic artists who help to breathe a lot of life into it.
Yeah.
And then I met a guy on Instagram, and he invited me onto a podcast, and then that pretty much brings us up to this moment.
Well, I'm glad you met that guy, because I'm really fascinated to hear from you. So many thoughts come up from the story you've told to date. A couple that I just want to get off my chest. I was talking to a game developer based in Baltimore, Maryland. His name is Ezra Zanton, and he was talking about how much he loves programming and coding games. And I was bringing up how, like, do aesthetics come into that? Because it's so fascinating how, like, the player mostly, at least at first, like, judges a book by its cover, if you will, whereas the coders for a game like are mostly thinking about systems and the code. And so it's really interesting to hear you talk about how the artists who you were able to hire through this grant like have really breathed life into the project, and it sounds like inspired you to a degree, even though at first it was kind of this magical convergence of boat ideas, as you were saying. And I don't know, I just think that's so beautiful how like hearing about how the creator of a project or the co-creator of a project can kind of find his way back to loving it in a different light now that these other collaborators have come on.
That's actually a great way to put it. It's like I look at it from a very systematic perspective, and for a lot of it I did, because it's like you don't really think about the art because at the end of the day, the game has to be fun.
Mm-hmm.
And that's you kind of focus on that, and then you get so laser focused on that all those other things kind of fall to the wayside. Like, how does the game look? Because you're right, a lot of people do see it and they're just like, this looks good or this looks bad. And then you have to play it. Like Vampire Survivors, a lot of people saw Vampire Survivors or He Is Coming or any of the games like that, right? And they're just like, oh, this doesn't look great. I'm going to skip it. Or then there's people who are, there's definitely people like with He Is Coming who's just like, oh, this is an aesthetic that reminds me of my youth, so I want to play it. But those aren't always the biggest chunk of people. But Vampire Survivors had such a great loop to it, right? It was fun. It was engaging. And, that was definitely, somebody cared very much about the gameplay and getting that core loop down. And then when it came to art, they're just like, I don't know what to do. And I think that's where we're a little bit different, because if it wasn't for Mike's help and support, we would have to be so focused on the game design, because we're not in it to make money, we're in it to make this game. And none of us, like Alan actually went to school for art, and he's definitely got more artistic eye and capabilities than I do. And like he actually graduated, so he went to school, he finished, so he did all those good things. And I'm the example of like how to do it, the wrong way or the other way. And but it takes a lot of bandwidth to create all that stuff. And the people who can create all the logic and the code and do the art, like those are super people. They're unicorns. They're amazingly talented. And I don't think like Eric, I'm probably going to say his name, Bannon, wrong, the guy who made Stardew Valley. The people who can make the engine, the art, everything all on their own. They're just like, I'm just going to do the whole thing. Like, those people are amazingly talented people, and they should be celebrated in their own. They should get their own category. They're so uniquely talented. But like people who are so focused on systems, you don't always have the funds, and you'd love to be able to hire somebody to help you.
Yeah.
Or not even hire, just like to get some help.
Yeah.
And having a little bit of money, like just getting those grants. And I think if I had to give advice to anybody who's making games, it's like try to find, like, Google and try to find those contests, those grants, those opportunities that will give you a little bit of extra money, because it's either going to give you money that will allow you to focus more on creating, or for you to fill in some of those gaps that you might have in your own skill set, like being able to create art that's not just what we call programmer art, which is something that you could slap together in like Microsoft Paint,
right?
And that really is a huge thing that I think people overlook, or they don't really understand when it comes to like the indie developers. Like some of them are literal superheroes, and just having that opportunity to have a little bit of funding from any source can help you elevate the product, and it's a fantastic opportunity that not everybody has. We were lucky enough that we were able to have that opportunity. Yeah, I don't know. I just hope that more people can, because I love seeing more and more games.
Yeah, that was the thing another thing I was going to mention is like, it is so important to hear you say like, look, 2/3 of FloWHOA like have no interest in like making money outside of just like being able to make the game. But it's so important to hear that there was someone who came on the team who had, more of a business focus to be able to enable it. Because I don't think it's worth or, fair to call a person with those interests like even anywhere close to like a necessary evil type thing. It's more just like necessary for the system that we all operate in, whether we like it or not. And I think that that's something that's so fascinating to think about just as like a fan or enthusiast, is like, of course we all wish, at least folks who are listening to this show and engaging with it, of course we all wish that like game makers could just like make their dream projects and like have the capacity to do that. But that's why it's so important to me to like celebrate and uplift and hopefully like be able to garner a little bit more grassroots support for the folks who make things, just period. Because I think we are entering a time, as you discussed, where like the best games are being made by people who were laid off from their previous jobs. And it is a time where the market is like getting very saturated with like, indie studios, projects that want to be kickstarted, projects that want to be like community funded. But I think like the benefits of that, whether it is through just like patrons on Patreon or a municipal grant or what have you, like the benefits of that are so much greater than like the few AAA games we would be getting if those folks were still working at the places they were working. And so there is an opportunity for this to be like a beautiful and productive time for maybe not everyone, but like a huge chunk of the folks who have like suffered a lot in the recent years. And I think like that's why it's so important to me and gets me fired up to like talk to folks like you and share your stories, because that is like super important in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you really nailed it. Is that all of these layoffs that happen? It's a sad part of capitalism. We can talk about capitalism another time. I'm sure there's a better podcast that'll shit on capitalism, which should be. But it is, like you said, it's a necessary thing, because we don't live in that ideal Star Trek world where you can pursue your passions, because starving artists is a real thing, and there are starving artists in video games, in every art form, right?
Yeah.
Because you create things out of passion and not necessarily out of money. But finding those funds, and it doesn't have to be, we were lucky. We were able to find a grant, and they believed in what we were going to do, and so they gave us some money. But not everybody has that. But everybody does have access to the internet, and when you're an indie, getting your Steam page up early and and getting people to look at it and to talk about it is like the biggest challenge you will ever have, because one of the cool things that has come out over the last recent years is this new wave of developer focused publishers and facilitators. And it's not something that the industry had when I started or even before that, but they they come in, and your game's out on Steam, not even out, just announced, right? You got a Steam page. You start getting wish lists. If people like your vision, if they love your demo, like, get a wish list, get your Steam page up, get some cool screenshots out that are in, make sure it represents your game, because like nothing pisses people off by seeing some cool screenshots and then they play your game and they're like, these two things are mixed. So like you're gonna have a bad time there. Like, don't be disingenuous with your Steam page. But if you're actually creating the game and you get your Steam page out and you get a demo or you get a video and people are engaging with it, even if it's just a small amount of people, find out what they like, what they don't like, and not build your game to those things, but have those conversations and start thinking about it, because there this new wave of publishers. They're very developer friendly, not like before. Like before, like publishers would have these awful contracts where it's like the studios would work for them and it'd be like, we get 85% of the money, right, you get 15% of the money, and maybe a few years down the line we'll renegotiate that. But the publishers now, they're just like, oh wow, you're building this game, it looks like it's a lot of fun, people believe in you, we believe in you, what do you need to finish this, and it becomes less of this predatory exchange and this predatory relationship to something a lot more balanced and more in favor of these little indie devs, where they can say, oh, I'd love some money for some art, or I'd love some money for some marketing, and they're just like, great, we'd love to provide that for you. Here's a deal, here's a contract. And you can't get those contracts until you have a Steam page or demo. And like, as an indie dev, those should be your first two focuses, specifically the demo.
Yeah.
Because until you have something that people can play, you just have an idea. And it's really hard for somebody to believe in an idea. But if they can play it, you're gonna get more, even if not everybody loves it, right? Because the other thing that is, I think that we're gonna see over the coming years is like this emergence, and it's already starting now, of like these super niches. Because you've got so much to choose from, you can really find that game that is like a super niche thing that you really love. It checks all of your weird boxes. Like it could be a game about turtles and bullet hells, and and this is just what you wanted. A game, it's a bullet hell game about turtles. And it's like, that can exist now, and it's probably going to be made by a really small team or one or two people. And those games can get really, really big, because like with so much audience, these niche markets can kind of organically emerge. And yeah, I think what you said, how things are going to kind of blossom, and using that growth metaphor that you put forward, I think is pretty accurate as to what's going to happen in the next coming years. But the only way you can get there is by getting yourself to that point where your seed can get out there, your demo, your Steam page, or whatever.
Yeah. And one of the things that drives me to do this podcast, but also just day to day, and my passion and my hobbies and my joys, is like, creators need players too. Like, it's almost like we need folks who are planting the seed, but you also need like the soil. And so I don't want people to like downplay the act of like, oh, I play games, but it's not like a thing, or like, oh, like I play games to waste time or whatever. Like, play is an act of joy that is meaningful, not only to oneself, but, to folks like you who make the stuff that is meant to be played. It's not like a painting where you can stand back and just look at it and have that be the only thing if that's all it's meant to be. You know, games are made to be played, and so that's another thing that I love to highlight.
Yeah, I think that's great because, people love reading books, and if you were to tell somebody, "Oh, I love reading," they're like, "Oh, that's rad," good for
Yeah.
you. Or you'd be like, "Oh, I love listening to music," or, I love finding new music. They're like, "Oh, that's rad. That's
Yeah.
normal. It's good." But then, and this might be because I'm older, an older generation, and I definitely see to my kids where they don't have the same stigma. But like for me, a lot of it's like, I never wanted to tell somebody that I loved playing games or that I loved playing games, because it'd be like, "Oh, what do you do?" It's like, "Oh, I'd make something up." I don't know.
Yeah.
Because if I were to say, "Oh, I love playing video games," it's like, "Oh, you fucking nerd."
Yeah.
And they dismiss your joy.
Exactly.
And then that makes you feel even crummier. Like, "Oh, am I doing something really bad?"
Yeah.
But I think all those people who grew up playing games and being nerds started to have kids, and then they're just like, "No, don't make people feel bad for liking this stuff. Like,
right.
People shouldn't feel bad for liking anything."
Yeah.
Because you shouldn't. And
Yeah.
those kids grow up, and like my kids, everybody plays games. Like their friends play games, and their friends listen to music or do whatever. So it's like there's a lot less of people feeling bad about that sort of thing nowadays, which I think is really good.
Yeah, I agree. Just a few more things to touch on before we
Sure.
move, kind of switch chapters here. There's a book by Jason Schreier that I think encapsulates some of what you experienced at Digital Extremes. It was published in 2021, so a little bit before you experienced it, but it's called Press Reset. And it is like, he has two other books, and this is like the second one, the sophomore effort. And I think just whether it's you or folks that are listening that want to kind of have a lot more, I don't think you need it necessarily because you experienced it, but for fans like me who want to have a lot more of an intimate picture of like the devastation of like layoffs and how, like, what conditions led to those layoffs, he does a really good job of interviewing folks in that book, but also describing like greater trends of like, there was this bubble that burst and all that, the fallout. So Press Reset is a very good book if you want to learn more about that kind of sad trend. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention is it's really fascinating to hear you talk about how you started with Click and Play and moved to Game Maker, because that's like the exact trajectory of another indie dev that I've loved for my entire time playing games. Derek Yu is like, he was the maker of Spelunky, UFO 50. That was his exact trajectory, and he actually started like or not started, but he took over editing these forums for indie devs simply because he like really appreciated the Click and Play community when he was coming up. And like
I know a lot of people even remembered Click and Play. Like I could never buy Click and Play. I only ever had that demo. So like, that's awesome.
Yeah, and he was just he always talks about how like he kind of similar to you, like was playing games. I think he had the full Click and Play version and was like, I'm just going to make something. And he put it out, and he said like a few people commented on it. Like it was a top-down shooter, I think. And a few people commented on it and were, saying, this is great, like suggesting future iterations on it. And he was like, that was, all the, the jolt of inspiration I needed to keep going. And it just speaks to like how much of a community effort I think games are, not just in the sense of like getting them funded, getting them made, but like how, inspiration can spread just kind of naturally when people engage with something. And that's something I'm feeling on this call right now. So it's fascinating to like have that cycle continue with you, Ryan. So thanks for sharing.
I think community is a great word for it, because even from a player perspective, it's finding the games that bring you joy, and then stumbling across somebody else is just like, oh, I played that game too.
Yeah.
And then you're just like, oh yeah, and then you start talking about it. And the communities that we form around the things that we love, whether it's art, or music, or video games, which I guess they're all technically art, I think that's like the strongest draw, the thing that pushes most people to create things and to consume them too, because it's just like you love that somebody poured their heart and soul into this thing, and it's more true for like your indie games. You could really feel the passion. It's a little disconnected when you play something like Assassin's Creed or the latest Call of Duty.
Right.
It's not to say that those things aren't there, because the people behind them are really super passionate people.
Totally.
But there is like, you do feel a different layer of it, and the community is a little more accessible, I think, to the smaller indie crowds than it is to those bigs, because you're one quiet voice in a room full of people yelling when you're doing Call of Duty, versus when you get in on the ground floor of like when FloWHOA was just coming up and people are just playing it, and you're able to have those conversations with the people in the community, and they don't move so fast that you get drowned out. That's an endearing feeling.
Yeah.
A feeling that you really can't get anywhere else. And it's, like going and seeing a local band play and being able to talk with them afterwards, like it's like those feelings. Is I get when I talk to other people who make games. You're just like, oh yeah, it's kind of like the same thing.
Yeah, and I think endearing is the exact right adjective, as far as like, I think in a world where players can be endeared to creators and the other way around, that's where we create these like kind of, I don't know if it's fair or that poetic to call it like a market, but I almost want to say like a market of reciprocity, where it's like people are not, screaming at you like, make this faster, I need it, but like, take as much time as you need. I'm so excited to see what you make next, type of thing. Yeah. And we see that with some folks who are pretty high profile, but I think like my goal, especially with this show, is to like get folks invested in projects, like you said, that they might not have heard about, or just find more games that they can love made by good people. So I think that's wonderful to hear. We've talked a lot about philosophical things. That's my joy. That's what I enjoy. I also am interested in like your favorite part about working on the code for Scallywags, and just some of like the challenges that you encounter in creating an engaging roguelike, because I think one of the things that fascinates me is how much that genre has taken off today, especially for indies. And I was wondering, like, what's it like to code a game like that? And what kind of, I guess, interests you about the design, or like even is concerning for you about the design as trying to compete in this saturated market of roguelikes?
That's a good question. Like working with the code, if we break it into things, was something I was super excited for when we got the project established. Because I'm like, oh, I'm going to be able to code on a real project. It's not just my own. It's like, like it's a status symbol. It's like, oh, I might be a real programmer by the time I'm done this, But there's so many other things that I have to do that's definitely not the case. So it's like, so we set up the program, the Unreal. We use Unreal for Scallywags, and I set it up as a C++ project, thinking, oh, I'm going to be able to write all these custom functions and do all this custom stuff. I've probably done like 2 or 3 functions, and I do the rest in blueprints, because blueprints with Unreal are so fast. And it uses a lot of the same logic. Like you have to think in a lot of the same ways, but it's really, really visual, and it's really, really fast. And one of the things that I think a lot of people overlook, because it's like, and by fast, I mean like it's fast to make something, not necessarily fast like as far as resource consumption is, because blueprints are technically a little less optimal than straight code. But it's fast in the sense that like you can make something very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And test it and iterate on it. And that's where the blueprint strength really comes into play. So I really haven't done a ton of programming for Scallywags because I haven't had the need to. In the grand scheme of things, once we get all the content and everything squared away, I'll start converting as needed, converting like blueprints into C++ to gain some performance and things like that if we need to. But it's not a super need. Unreal has been around for so long, and they've created so many tools to empower creators. There's a lot of stuff that you would normally make or need like your own solution for, they already have. And so that's coming really super handy. But we did have to I don't know how familiar you are with how difficult it is to have movement upon movement.
Yeah, I'm not familiar, so you'll have to explain it.
One of the things that is hard to do in video games is to say move on an object that is also moving, but to have everything else be kind of relative.
Right.
Like if you were in a shooter and you're running on a train that was moving through a world, and then you could shoot a bullet from your train and it could travel down the train as it would in real life, but everything's moving all around.
Right.
And that's very difficult to do in a video game.
It's hard to even imagine.
Yeah. And a lot of things, but like a lot of games do it, and for the most part, it's all smoke and mirrors. So like if you're in a level in a game and you're on a boat or you're in a train or on a bus and the world's going by, right? Your bus isn't actually moving. Your train's not moving. It's static.
Yeah.
And you move the world around the window, so it feels like you're moving. And then you can shoot up the inside of the bus, and it can do all these fancy calculations, and it feels really good and smooth, and nothing's problematic because it's you're not actually, the world's not actually moving. You can move through this bus because the bus is static and the world moves around it.
Yeah.
So when it comes to all the calculations that you have to do for collisions, physics, and everything like that, it's very easy. It gets more costly when you have to move on a moving thing where your movement is relative and everything like that. So it's a problem in games, and usually when people solve it, it's like a super secret thing because it's like, oh, we've got this solution. It works really, really great. But like Call of Duty has it, and if you've ever played like Warzone or something like that, they got a train that moves through and it's nice and fluid. Battlefield, all the big games, like they have these complex solution, and they're really sophisticated solutions.
Yeah.
But that's usually out of reach for the small guy because it takes teams of people and lots of stuff. But it was one of the things that I had to do in order to make Scallywags, because like we wanted to have a bunch of movement, and in Scallywags, you control your boat and you move your crew around your boat, right?
Yeah.
And your boat can change distance. It can get closer to your opponent or further away, and you can use all of that to dodge incoming attacks and things. Or like some maneuvers require you to be close and you could like board them, or far away you can escape.
Right.
So there's a bunch of movement that we wanted to do in the game. And not only that, but there's like gameplay movement. It makes the gameplay feel better. So like the boat gets shot or takes damage and it rocks, it tilts this way or that way. But you've got all these little guys on the boat. And if the boat rocks too much, they're just going to fall off.
Right.
And the engine has to do all these calculations of their positions. And when they want to move from one place to another place, it has to do all those calculations. And those calculations get even more complex when that thing is also moving this way or this way or this way or through the world. So we came up with and I don't know how technical you want me to get, but
no, this is fascinating.
There's a little piece of tech I was reading about Sea of Thieves and how Sea of Thieves solves the problem that they have with it. They have these big rolling oceans, and players can sail their boats through, but it's so hard to have players and replication and all that stuff running around on a boat, which is essentially a level, but while that's also moving through these other parts of the world, and it becomes a compound problem. And they were talking about how they had kind of a solution where they're just like, well, we have a copy of it and, hidden somewhere in the world. I'm just like, oh, that's brilliant. And then they just like use this relative calculation to move things around. I'm like, oh, that's such a smart thing. I wonder if I can do that. And the long story short is that I came up with our own solution to do it, where our boats, we have like the boats, and then there's a pair that's static and stable, and navigation, which is like this service set of math that um, is generated on in levels in a lot of different engines that the AI used to pathfind around, right? So um, that's super stable on this hidden sim pair that we have. And
Yeah.
then on our other one, it can be rocky, it can be moving, it can be up and down and sideways. But all the crew that are on this one are kind of like we're using this relative. We take a position, so you only ever see this one over here that can move and it's all dynamic, and you can grab a crew member and move them, and they're going to move, and hopefully it feels seamless.
Yeah.
Because all of the calculations and all of the pathing and everything are being done on this super stable environment way off
Right.
screen. Um, and it's actually really neat how it all works, and it all came together really well, and it allows us to do some really fun stuff. So that's probably like the most code intense and most interesting thing that I did with like the engineering side of things on
Yeah.
Scallywags. I don't know if that's really what the question was about.
I mean,
kind of sidetracked.
It's fascinating to see the vertices not only of like your mind and the calculations going on therein, but like the amount of intention. I think it's super valuable to hear what you said, and for a listener just like myself perhaps to be like completely out of their depth in listening to it, just because it brings to the fore how much intention goes into details that we might just take for granted when playing a game. Where it's like, yeah, it's a boat, it rocks on the water, like, of course. But as you were saying, like, the engine is doing all these calculations. You as a developer are like spending not only like development time on it, but research time on it, and like nerding out about the physics of it. And I don't know, those are the kinds of details that bring me a lot of joy and give like texture to my life as a game enthusiast, is like learning about stuff like that. So I appreciate you explaining it.
Oh, yeah. All right. Hopefully I did it justice. I have a hard time explaining things versus like doing something and then explaining it are two very different things.
Totally.
Because it's like you can go like you can go super deep, and it's just like you go to the surface, and I often ramble, as you probably noticed.
I mean, this is
it's
lovely.
It was cool. That was like a solution that I'm pretty proud of. But it's
Yeah.
also one of those things that it's just like most engineering problems. It's right. It's like you're super proud of it, but
Yeah.
like because you did it right, nobody is ever gonna know it exists.
Right. That's
Because
kind of
it's
the
like,
catch-22.
yeah, is it like when and why it's so. I love celebrating artists, specifically like game artists, because their work is so visual and it's so impactful. You can feel it and everything. And I think that's as you engineer a solution, you never get that. Like nobody's going to be like, oh, this feels so good, and they might say that, but in general, if you do it right, they don't notice it at all.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, yeah, it's one of those things. Like a lot of work and a lot of intention goes into the system, but like when you do it right, nobody else is going to notice, and it's kind of sad, but it's also kind of fun.
Yeah.
I don't know what the word is for it, but like there's probably a word for it, but yeah, it's one of those things that it's just like, yeah, when you do your job right, it's like it was like a line from Futurama, is I guess where I remember it the most, is when Bender is God and he's just like, I was God once, and he's like, it doesn't feel like I really did anything. It's just like, oh, that's how you know you're doing it right. It's like you've done nothing at all.
Yeah, I mean, to me, what it reads most closely to, just as an analogy, is like what we humans take to be like magic, kind of like performance magic, where it's like a magician never reveals their trick. And for people just looking at it, it's like, that was so cool. But, you know, the magician works on it time and time again and knows the intricacies behind it in a way that maybe it's not as much magic for them, but it is just as engaging, if not more.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's really cool to hear. We've talked a lot about a number of things. One thing that I would love to hear more concretely from you is if I gave you a megaphone that could reach all the people who identify as game players, enthusiasts perhaps, but are not really as interested in the making game side of things. What do you wish they could know about the developers whose art they consume?
I think it would just be to play more, play everything. If it excites you, it maybe it would be to spend some time looking through like your bargain bin podcast or you go to your top trending list on Steam. It's like, go to the last page.
Yeah.
There's a ton of really interesting and fun games out there, and people are always making new and fun games. And if you want to support it, if you want to find more, buy one.
Yeah.
Right? It's $5, it's $10, $15, whatever. It's like, buy one, because that one purchase means the world to the people who made the game.
Yeah.
Right? And if you can't afford a game, because like the thing is, life is expensive, right? Maybe you can't afford a game.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's a game that excites you that you heard about, go and wishlist it.
Yeah.
Because that shows an intent, and it's a like we were talking about earlier about like the necessary evils of capitalism. A wish list for most indies, it's their lifeblood. And as those people show interest in your game, it motivates you to keep going, which is invaluable to these small teams or these single developers, right? Because it's like, developing is hard, and if you're lucky like me, where you can secure a little bit of funding so that I can dedicate a majority of my day to doing it, and because if you're not lucky, it's all being done in your off hours, right? You're working a full-time job, or you're living your full-time life, and then you're doing this in your spare time.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of energy. And seeing +1 wish list makes a lot of that feel better. And that is rewarding in and of itself, because everybody's got a Steam page. There's like a little metrics thing, and behind the scenes, once your Steam page goes out, like, you look at it and you're just like,
yeah,
oh, are people interested today? So yeah, I guess that would be it. It would be like, they're the indies wish lifeblood, and a wish list. I mean, buy it if you can, but if you can't and you're interested, like, don't be disingenuous or anything. But like, if you're interested, wish list it, because that makes you will make somebody's day.
That's so important to hear, particularly because while you were talking, one thing I was thinking about is how we've talked about this interview, like, creative stuff oftentimes feels a lot like you're throwing stuff out into the void, and not really receiving a ton of feedback on it unless you already have a large following. And I was thinking of, like, whether it's, YouTube owned by Google or like Steam owned by Valve or what have you. A lot of the time that's the case because we're putting our stuff on these, marketplaces that kind of thrive on separating the creator from the fan for a number of different reasons. And I think it's so important to hear you say, like, yes, you going and wishlisting, Scallywags in this case, or any creator's game, they see that and they really care about it. So I think that's a super important takeaway from this conversation.
Yeah, like, one little effort will literally, like, one little click from you will change somebody's day. And you can have that kind of positive outlook, or positive impact, on somebody by just doing that. And
but it, like, implies a positive outlook too. So it's funny that was a slip where it's like, going and wishlisting something is not only positive and you're like, I'm going to buy this in the future potentially, or I want to follow the game, but also it's like, like, I want to show someone I care. So it's cool that even in today's day and age where things do feel so commercial a lot of the time, like, that's still a little gesture that we can do.
And I guess if you don't want to be commercial, like you go to itch.io.
Definitely.
It's a great place where people put out little teeny tiny prototypes and games, and a lot of times they're free and they're easy to get into.
Yeah.
Support places like that too. A lot of people get their starts from there.
Ryan, you seem like someone who might enjoy like a type of like work for a while, little game, work for a little bit more. And I actually have a game to recommend from Itch to you and the listeners. It's called Domino Grove. Takes about 2 minutes to play and is a super fun little puzzler. It kind of reminds me of like the New York Times, like kind of connections and things like that. But I love that it's on Itch and made by a small creator.
Oh, that's amazing. I love little things like that because, I do. I mentioned it before, like with your podcast, is that sometimes you got to have your front brain busy while your back brain does stuff. And that was the kind of little things that I love. So.
Yeah, definitely. Of course, I have had you for a long time here. One more question. We've talked about your joy as a father, your joy as a father to both your children and your pets, who are probably also furry children, if I know anything about owning pets. But I was just wondering, like, this is a question I like to ask just to kind of humanize the folks behind the mic and behind the games. Like, what's something that keeps you whole and feeling nourished by life outside of games?
So, my family is a big thing. Like, I love my kids and the support that they provide, and my wife too. Like, she's fantastic. But outside of that, or them, no, they're not that, they're thems. Is animation, I think. And YouTube is this big corporate monster, but YouTube has really allowed this like indie animation and short films to really kind of grow. And I've always loved animation since I was young. I think that animation allows storytellers to do things that you can't do with like a live actor, right? Because it's like bodies can't move or bend or do whatever. There's so much potential in animation, and there's so many different styles, and it's so expressive and it's so beautiful. I love, like, I'm constantly finding little animations and little channels and things because I love it, and it fills my bucket seeing new animations and stuff like that. So definitely animations. Like there's this punk rock band from the west coast of Canada called Rare Americans, and not only is almost every single one of their songs like masterfully crafted earwormy thing that just gets in your head and doesn't let go, but they have all animated albums and music videos.
Oh, that's
and
so
they
cool.
Put so much care into this content. I just love it. Like, it's great to have on, and you listen to the music, but it's also good to watch because they tell such intricate and amusing stories through their animation, through their lyrics. People like Glitch, who facilitate Digital Circus, and Knights of Guinevere is one of the new ones, which was really cool because it's like made by the animation team and the storytellers from Owl House, which was really popular. And they're telling new stories, and like we're able to see these new stories come to life that otherwise wouldn't really see the light of day. So I think that's really what fills my bucket, stuff like that.
Well, for you, it's filling your bucket. For me, it's filling my cup. This conversation has certainly done so, Ryan, and I just wanted to, again, say a huge thank you for your time. It's been a true joy talking to you.
Oh, well, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, of course.
There's one more thing, and it's like you've done it with the other ones. And when it comes time to asking how to grow the garden, who to talk to, can it be somebody that I've never met before?
Yeah, for sure. The propagation feature, I've shied away from it on some interviews just because I have tried reaching out to some people and it's like hard to get in touch, and I don't want to let people down, but I will try. Give me a name.
Okay. But I'll give you a name. So the people at YCJY Games.
YCJY.
YCJY, they're a little indie studio from Sweden. they make the most recent game was called Keep Driving. And it's a phenomenal game.
Yeah,
It's
I've
like
heard of it.
this musical take on roguelikes and combat. It's not combat. It's so fun. The characters are so engaging. I just love to hear more about their journey.
Yeah.
And that would be really, really cool. So
yeah, that's a great recommendation, and I'm gonna reach out to them right after editing this episode. We'll see if we can grab them. I'm always happy to try. I just don't want to let the people who ask down or the listeners down when they're like, "Oh, that'd be great," and then I can't get them because I'm just a little guy here on my own. But I'm gonna try.
Everybody's a little guy sometimes, and that's the thing. All we can do is try, and that's how you succeed, right? If you don't try, you'll never.
That's true. That's true. And I'll just say one last thing while I have you to make sure that you hear it and the listeners hear it, and I'll say it multiple times again in my kind of wrap up. But wishlist Scallywags. We talked about the importance of doing so, and I'm gonna include the link to do that to the Steam page in the show notes, in addition to kind of a number of other things we've talked about. So head there for the resources, but most importantly, head to the show notes to click the link to wishlist Scallywags, and I know that Ryan and myself will be very appreciative.
I definitely will appreciate it. And while you're wishlisting things, go find somebody else and give them a wish list.
Yeah.
Make their day.
Yeah, spread the love. There you have it, folks. That was Ryan Marr. What a generous soul. I find myself consistently inspired by the folks that I talk to on this show, but perhaps none more so than him. I could just tell that he had such a big heart and so much to give, not only to games, but just to other humans. So I really appreciate his time, and please do go wishlist Scallywags today. I can't think of a better human to support. So thanks for doing that. Also, before I get into my spiel today, I just wanted to say that if you've listened this far, it's likely that you have been enjoying at least a little bit of what I've had to offer. And right now I'm not doing any kind of like you give me money type thing. I mostly just would love to see your support by telling one friend. I don't do anything to advertise the show, so telling someone about it would make my day, kind of equivalent to a wish list, as we talked about. And if you want to do something more tangible, you can subscribe to me on YouTube at Indie Game Garden. Give me a follow on Instagram at Indie Game Garden, Blue Sky at Darth Malks, Malks, or more than any of those things, actually, rating the show on your podcast app of choice, or giving me a rating or a comment on YouTube would make my day. So thanks for doing those things, and yeah, ultimately, thanks for listening. I've been thinking a lot over the past couple of days about kind of what you heard Ryan and I referring to in that chat. He was calling it filling your bucket. He said his kids brought that home from school. I call it filling my cup. Not really sure where I got it from, but it's something I think about a lot these days as I get closer and closer to just having to make some big decisions in my own life about where I'm going to be living, how I'm going to be spending my time, and I think the thing that fills my cup the most is developing a community with fellow game enthusiasts, whether they're makers or players. You probably heard in my voice how important it is to me to have both of those things in this world. And I realized that as I was doing some Vita tinkering, I got a PS Vita a couple weeks ago, and you probably heard me talking about it in a previous episode. I got pretty burnt out from tinkering pretty quickly, and it kind of put me into a funk just in life, because when I get disconnected from my passions, I kind of feel general sense of dread, and I don't like feeling that way, but it does happen sometimes. And I was thinking through like why I feel that way and what triggers it. And I realized in this case that even within games as an idea and as a hobby, there are things that, drain and fill my cup. And the draining aspect is like getting set up, whether that's like getting new tech or tinkering with a handheld or what have you. Those things can be fun in kind of a type A kind of way, but they're not relaxing and they're not as joyful for me as the act of play. Discovering different little creators' work on itch, or playing a new game that I kind of dug through the Steam list to find and really enjoying it, or playing a buzzy new release and really enjoying it. That's something I do often, and definitely find as much joy in as someone who's just like kind of casually picking up a game when they hear a lot of press about it. And so engaging with those systems, not even from the sense of like wanting to make them myself, not even from the sense of like wanting to be critical of them or approach them in a more critical light to write about them or talk about them in a video. Mainly just because my brain feels good when I do that, and I feel like a part of a larger community, and that's really what fills my cup, and that's what I want to drill down on and get a lot closer to in the coming weeks and months and years, and that's how I want to live my life. So if you feel similarly, I see you, and if you're looking for new joys or perhaps new ways to enjoy your gaming hobby, I would recommend, really drilling down on what fills your cup and letting that guide your play. Because, hey, we're human. We are inefficient, improper beings who obviously have a whole lot of learning to do left as far as like finding ourselves. And I think we all need play. We all need play in our lives. So let that drive you, and I think you can't go wrong. With that in mind, I do have a game to recommend this week, and that is the game that I recommended to Ryan in the interview. It's by one of the folks I interviewed in the past, Ezra Zanton. You can find it on his itch. It is called Domino Grove, and it is a game that I've been playing every day for the past week. It essentially is a game about planting trees, in air quotes, that are really these little dominoes that you can rotate around a grid, and you get points for matching up colors and shapes. And it's just really relaxing and brings me back into myself as a player, as someone who loves play, loves to think about simple systems, and loves to see the elegance in them. I can't say enough good about this game, so I hope you go play it, and I hope you go leave Ezra a comment there, encouraging him on in his game dev career. While you're at it, you can support his new commercial offering, which is Mr. Magpie's Harmless card game, and maybe that's the other game you wishlist alongside Scallywags this week. That's kind of all I have for you. Please, please, please go do wishlist Ryan's game, Scallywags, on Steam. He was an absolute delight to talk to, and I have nothing but good things to say. So do that. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.